The energy in the house started feeling really bizarre. In the gardens, we began finding objects from, the 18th century, 19th century. Some of those objects were like a gun, teeth, really old candlesticks, a cauldron,
Hello, family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name's Betty, and today I'm joined by Leah. And Leah is an author, a spiritual teacher, and an illuminator. I love that so much. Sometimes when I ask people to give me the titles that they like to go by, they're like, I don't do titles, but illuminator, you nailed it. That's amazing. I'm really excited for your willingness to serve our community at IANDS, and I'm going to toss it right over to you to start introducing yourself to us.
Thank you so much, Betty. Well, I am a spiritual teacher, as Betty said, and I've had a very full career in the healing arts. I was always very passionately drawn towards spirituality and wellness since I was a little girl. But as many young people, I didn't understand a lot about it at that time. As many young people are, I was very sensitive and kind of attuned to angels, to energy, to seeing things that I didn't know what they were. And so I just kind of, let it go. But I did start a relationship very early on, what I would call a spiritual relationship early on. And over the course of my childhood, I had several trauma experiences, some which were little t traumas and others which were big T traumas. Such as my parents got divorced, and the same year my aunt was murdered. I had an eating disorder. I had an anxiety issue. Later in my young 20s, I had a sexual assault experience. And through all of these experiences, I kind of fell to my knees, and I needed help. And so I was doing kind of the traditional things that everyone does in therapy and antidepressants and trying this and that. And then I slowly started entering into the realm of alternative or holistic health and wellness, and doing yoga and breath work and a variety of things like that. And a friend of mine recommended that I try this school in California, which was a school of enlightenment and healing. And it was there that I intentionally sought out to learn about energy and to learn about channeling and to learn about the mind body connection and meditation and all kinds of things. And so I was doing it primarily at the time for myself, for my own healing journey. But what I soon discovered was it was so effective for me. And it also kind of made sense of a lot of my earlier experiences of what I was feeling and seeing and hearing as a young person and up until that point. And so it just kind of became a lens that I started to see the world through and how I started to see other people through. And of course, for myself, it was very effective, as I said. So I was on my healing. So I was on my healing journey at the same time. Um, Shortly after, then I went to another healing arts school for physical body work and studied a lot about chronic pain and the mind, and again, meditation, energy, and polarity therapy. So I really kind of dove into a lot of studies, and that's what I've been doing ever since, some form of healing modality. It has morphed and shifted from the physical and emotional. And of course, we're talking 30 years ago. So at that time, there was a very small sector of people talking about consciousness or about energy healing or about mystical, metaphysical experience. So as time went on and as I got comfortable working with clients, I started offering some of my other modalities. And one of my gifts at that time was kind of being able to sense what was going on in a person's body through my hands or just through the energy and experience. And so I was able to help a lot of people understand their illnesses, their dis-ease, and so forth. And now I primarily focus on spiritual growth and emotional healing, including doing intuitive readings, mediumship, astral travel, remote viewing, soul retrieval work, inner child work. I lead a lot of corporate seminars, workshops, meditations, and things like that for groups and retreats. And so I love what I do. And I've written 3 books. The 3 books that I've written are primarily very kind of Well, they're primarily based in, again, the emotional healing aspect of our lives, because I think that is a foundational piece of understanding how we view the world. And so, although I consider myself, what I call myself, is like a Christian mystic, I think a lot of people who are seekers, who are trying to have spiritual experiences or have had spiritual experiences and don't understand them, it's very easy for us to get into the lofty energy, into our, crown chakras, our upper, like, want to have this expansive um experience here on earth, but we have to stay grounded in our bodies, stay rooted, stay connected, balanced, and all of these things. So I think, as a foundational piece, the emotional healing is really critical for most all of us, especially for those of us who have been through traumas, and also for those of us who want to do healing work. In the midst of all this, right before COVID, I bought an old house in a neighboring town on the river, on the Delaware River, but I was living in New Jersey, and the house is in New Jersey. And I ended up signing the papers the day of COVID lockdown. And I didn't know anyone in this town. And I would find myself there, as we all did at that time, very isolated, but I was in particularly felt very isolated. My boyfriend would come down the weekends. We'd clear the gardens, work outside. The house needed a lot of work. It's a 200-year-old historic home. And a few weeks into that experience, really bizarre things started happening. Things that don't sound too bizarre initially, like things getting stolen from the property. But if you saw the property and also knew this town, even the police were like, nothing like this ever happens here. And then when I started removing things from the facing of the house, either to paint or just redecorate or what have you, the energy in the house started feeling really bizarre. In the gardens, we began finding objects from, the 18th century, 19th century. And some of those, excuse me, some of those objects were like a gun, teeth, really old candlesticks, a cauldron, just all kinds of things. And then I began having these night terrors. And admittedly, there was some fear wrapped around living in this house during COVID at this time, because the house was kind of remote in the woods. And my one neighbor that I had, they had mental health issues and addiction issues, and they were elderly. And so I was very, very isolated. And it's not a large home, but a fairly decent sized home. So initially, I just kind of brushed it off to, okay, I'm just getting acclimated. It's like really dark out here. I don't know what kind of creatures are out in the night, whatever. Maybe I'm just having nightmares. But the nightmares continued, and there was always this one presence in the nightmare. It was what sensed like a male energy. And again, I thought, well, even though I feel like I've done a lot of healing work around this, and I feel very clear around the rape that I went through, I talked to therapists, I talked to my family, different people. I was like, could this be what's going on? It didn't feel aligned for me. And these night terrors, they weren't just scary dreams. They were like soul invasions. They were like psychic intrusions into my being. There were other things going on now in the house, like, noises, sounds, the fire alarms going off randomly. One night, the whole house shook. There was a lot of stuff going on, like a tree fell and hit my boyfriend's car, and kind of demolished the front end. There was no storm. So again, there was a part of me that was like, okay, there's just a lot of things to handle here, owning a home. And soon enough, though, I got in touch with the previous owners. And in fact, the woman who lived in the house right before me, she confessed to me that the first 9 months or so of her living there, she also had terrorizing nightmares that almost were identical to what I experienced. So then I was like, okay, something's going on here. This is not all my stuff. So I spent the next 2 years through COVID. That's what I was doing. I was remodeling a 200-year-old house and trying to clear dark energies from this place for the first 2 years of COVID. And I have found success with that. And I called in as much help as possible, but it turned out to be a very personal and really impactful, powerful time for me to go even deeper into some of my healing work personally, but also just deeper into any of the shadow work of the darkness that I was afraid of within myself over the majority of my life. And that I believe a lot of people are afraid of within themselves. And so I stayed in the house and I allowed the house and what was going on there to help inform me of what was going on inside of me. And then as I was working on myself and my clients and so forth, I would then work on the house. And it just became this really, really profound, well, healing is the only word I can think for it. And so then that would conclude, I guess, the majority of the story. I know I've left out a bunch of things, but there we go.
You said so much. Yeah, my mind is just running with so many questions that I have that I want to ask. I think the first thing that, and thank you for your vulnerability and thank you for sharing all of that. I think the first thing that's coming up for me, because I think that this is really common with people, is we think that we heal something and like, that's it, we're done, like book closed, like all finished. But you're talking about the fact that, this new experience that was happening was kind of bringing up some of your old trauma to be reprocessed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I kind of think both is true. So depending on who you are and what you want, how you want to experience your life, I think we can clear kind of, some traumatic experiences. So by and large, they don't affect us on the daily or in our sleep or in relationships and that kind of thing. I do think that is possible. However, I also believe that the lesson, the energy from those experiences continues and will always continue. And not just to say, these are our lessons in life, but they are our lessons in life. And there's always something to learn from those experiences. And so for like myself, of course, I've been working with clients, like I said, almost 30 years now. And my life, I feel devoted to helping other people and healing and expanding myself and opening myself. And whether we want to call that enlightening or enlightenment or awakening or what have you, that is like my purpose and passion here. And so I believe that when we have that kind of heart and that kind of longing to free ourselves truly, that this work never ends, really. There's always something to look at, and it can be a different layer, it can be a different perspective, it can be a different depth of what we're holding. And that's what it was for me. It was just kind of like, oh wow, and now let's go into the tunnel and kind of excavate the tunnel. The stuff on the top is clear, there's no problem, but this was kind of an invitation really, really deep in. And so it was terrifying, the how it was being kind of mirrored to me in the house experience. And honestly, I didn't want to do it. One, because I was exhausted and it was COVID and the house, I was doing all this work on the house, but also because I'm like you said, I was like, oh my God, I've already done so much of this. But then when I started really kind of committing to doing that work, that deeper work, it was such a gift. I mean, it's been the highlight of my life, honestly. And since then, I've written a one-woman show out of the material. I've written the screenplay that we're pitching now as a movie. It's not only changed me, it changed the level and the depth that I'm able to work with clients in my intuitive readings and also in my understanding them. And it also changed, well, in a certain degree, how I share my work. So it was utterly profound.
Wow, that's really powerful, and I love the realness that you're talking about. You're like, no, I don't want to do this, but you did it, and it ended up being one of the greatest gifts of your life. And I think that that's a really powerful testimony to anybody who's kind of procrastinating doing the inner work or really putting off, like going deep into some sort of trauma, whether it's for fear or exhaustion or whatever it is. Just knowing that if you had such a positive experience from it, they probably can too. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the physical manifestations of things showing up for you, and how did you transform that fear into faith?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I'll try to tell it in a shortened way, but there is an audiobook on my website, and the audiobook is called On Weeden Street. And so I tell the entire story in that audiobook, and it's just a few hours long. but essentially, as I was reaching out to people, I reached out to mediums and clairvoyants and ghost busters and energy clears. And even though I do this work, I already knew I was too attached. I was too in it to do any more than what I thought I could at the moment. So I was reaching out to priests, and finally I reached out to my handyman, and I was just kind of telling him I'm telling you at this point, I was going bonkers. I was like, what in the world's going on here? I don't even want to go to bed at night. I have to figure something out. And my handyman kind of reminded me about the power that we have within us and how to nurture ourselves and how to call upon the word, the truth, our source, and so forth. And up above my bed in the loft area where I was hearing a lot of the noises originally, I had several old books, and one of the old books up there was a Bible I had from when I was like in middle school or something. And I, again, I was like, let me go just, how you open a book and just try to get like a message. Cause I was like praying, somebody show me something, I need some help here. I don't know what to do. And I'd also bought like a mosquito net and put around my bed to kind of like protect myself. Anyway, I pulled down the Bible and I literally did the open the Bible thing, looking for something I could quote or some kind of protection or whatever. And this business card fell out. And the business card is a card that my grandmother in Kentucky had given me like 15, 16 years before that, before she passed away. And on the business card, it was like a local business card. It had absolutely no meaning to me. And I remember when she gave it to me, she said, take this. And I said, okay, but why? And she said, just take it. And it had her handwriting on it. So I took it, and she was, as I said, a very religious person. So I put it in the Bible to kind of as a keepsake of something from my grandma. Well, she had since passed years ago. And when I opened the Bible, that card fell out. And it was the first night I read it. And on the top of the card, it literally says, read this. And then there was 3 scripture verses, which were uncannily similar to what was going on for me around the house and me moving to the house and so forth. And then underneath that, it said, do this. And there were 5 points that she had written out. One of them, I keep them on my computer because I still use them every day, every night before I go to bed. I came to use these as like a point of protection. And as I was learning how to kind of create energy fields and barrier fields around the properties and work with the ley lines and so forth, these became my prayers at night. And one of them is pray in spirit every day. Another is activate your angels. And the third was we cannot murmur. And there were 2 others. And I kind of went through that process every night in my visualization and my calling upon the strength, the source, because you have to remember, I was terrified every night. It most of the time happened when my boyfriend was there, which was odd at first, but then it ended up happening a couple of times when he wasn't there. But on one occasion, after it happened, probably 10 times, he got out his cell phone to record what he was hearing, because I became actually verbal in the trying to protect myself and fend this energy off of me. And so we have that, and it's part of my one woman show. It's also on the audiobook. And so I just kind of really became very boundaried and very uncomfortable in myself of how I was organizing my energy and my thoughts and the fears. I mean, it really had me go through every part of myself. That's what I mean. It was such deep work. And I can tell you that, I laid my hands on the stone walls in the house, and that, was helpful. But it was all of it. It was the emotional piece. It was connecting with the other spirits that were there that were very positive energy sources. It was connecting with my guides and my angels and the source and God, and not just connecting, but relying and increasing my trust every single day, not shirking back, not murmuring, not being silent, not pawning off jobs for other people. It made me really, really show up to everything, whether it was a huge spider. I had bats in my bedroom. I mean, or, go up into to the eerie attic place up on the 3rd floor at nighttime by myself, or just comfort myself into that space of trust and sleep. And that's how I did it. I mean, it was a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how, out of like all the people that you talk to, the handyman was the guy who dropped the gem of spiritual knowledge that you're like, oh yeah, that's incredible. And then another thing that I want to discuss with you is, even though at this point in time you're a spiritual teacher, you're a medium, like you have access to all of these divine gifts, you still knew that you needed to ask other people for help and guidance. And I kind of want to get into that a little bit. I feel like when people are on the spiritual path and they've come into their gifts and they just think, well, I should know how to handle this myself. And they forget about the fact that we need other people to help us in different areas of our lives. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. One, from the energy of other people that expect people like myself, or even ministers or counselors or whomever, to not have issues or to be able to handle all kinds of things and to have this, a fortress of strength that is never penetrable. And it's just not accurate. We are human beings. And for me, on my healing journey, emotional journey, mental journey, and spiritual journey, I am never without support. Yes, my first support is always my relationship and connection to the divine and to my team, if you will. But I always have in this plane support on hand every week. And I get it that, there is, I guess people get frustrated, and it is time consuming, it's energy consuming, it's financially consuming. And we feel like, oh, we don't need to do that anymore, or, we're good. But I don't care who you are. If I'm working with someone who's not actively receiving for themselves, I don't want to work with that person for me, because I know that they're not getting what they need to sustain and to continue and to grow and to deepen and be able to track with me, because that's what I'm all about. It is about evolution. It is about, how we are transmuting our situations into something else and alchemizing and assimilating all that. And if somebody is stopped in their field and they think they're done, or that they know, or what have you, I think that's the most dangerous place to be. Every week, I mean, and it's every week, every day, I'm actively doing yoga, EMDR, Brima, some kind of body work, some kind of meditation or mental work, some kind of emotional work every day. It has to be part of my life, because if I check out for myself, like, first of all, I'm not in my flow, I'm not in my activation, if you will, and I'm also not staying present and holding the space for others, even if I don't have a client that day, or whatever. So I think it's critical. That's my view.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I love that you're talking about grounding into the body too.
Yes.
Again, I feel like a very common theme upon spiritual experiencers is just like, I'm going to sit in meditation for 4 hours. I'm going to like be in the ether and not be present in the human experience. And, this experience that you're talking about with everything that happened with the house, that really brings you super present in your body, because again, like you're experiencing fear inside your physical vessel and your emotional body as well. Something else that I had written down while you were talking, I wonder if maybe you can go a little into what is soul retrieval. I heard you mention that as one of the modalities that you
Mhm.
teach.
Yeah. Well, so in the terms that I work with soul retrieval, because there are um, different, there's shamans that work with it a certain way, there's therapists that work with it and they call it something different. But for me, it's really working with a person that has had any experience of any kind of trauma or separation within themselves. And a lot of people don't even know how to identify trauma for themselves. And from where I said, it's any experience that was too overwhelming to process in that moment. And a lot of us did not have people or the know-how in moments to process something fully to come to a resolution with it. And so it leaves an impact on us. So that can be one reason why we separate or split, if you will, while our soul kind of, um, seek safety. Energetically, I see that as like a part of our essence that literally kind of escapes the here and now embodiment of who we are. And so I go into a person's timeline, and without having any information from them, and I get information from their timeline about either a particular age or an event. Usually it's an age that then leads us to an event. And the event doesn't have to be a large event. It can be a humiliating event that was just kind of like, oh, every child goes through something like that. It could be a large trauma event. It could be something that is just kind of lingering in a person of like, oh, yeah, that, you know. And I can sense that at that time, a part of them separated. And so we do this work in a very conscious way. It's not like regressive or hypnosis or anything like that. It's very conscious of, can the you in this moment be open and willing enough to take in and receive this part of you that left because they were too scared, they didn't feel safe, they were in shock or what have you, they felt the humiliation or shame or fear. Can we be open to receive them without judgment, to have a commitment to hold space for them and reparent them, to offer this unconditional love, this integration? And when we do that, and this part of us comes back in, it's this beautiful reunion of aspects of us, of parts of our personality, of parts of us that we may have forgotten about. It's very, very subtle work. But again, as I said at the beginning, well, as an energy worker, I think the subtlety of and the nuance of so much of this work is where the real impact is, you know. So that's kind of how the soul retrieval works. We can't make it happen, and that's why I say my process is I kind of enter the timeline with permission and see if there's any parts that are ready to come back. And on occasion or two, I've had where the person, you know, I'm getting a no, the person isn't ready. But most of the time, there's one, sometimes two, sometimes three, you know, we don't know. And we can do it again. But usually there are parts that are like, okay, we've reached a level of maturity, of stability, of openness, of desire to have more of our wholeness, more of our self back now. And it can also give that sense of embodiment and presence in a person. It's just beautiful work.
Wow, that's really empowering. And yeah, you just sent my brain off on this whole like beautiful imagery of like these fractured pieces of glass and like
Yes.
you showing people the glue to kind of bring it back together. Really beautiful. Thank you for that. The
Mhm.
other thing that I wanted to ask you about was the mediumship. Now, you know, like I want to know, is this something that's accessible to everybody? How did you really start to practice and own this part of yourself? What was that process like?
Yeah, I do think mediumship is available to everyone. However, it does require, how do I say this without someone judging themselves? It requires us learning ourselves and having the patience and the skill to access a different part of our senses, and relying on trusting that sense. You know, a lot of people talk about our third eye, our sixth sense, our intuition, and I really see that as our first sense. And so all of our work that we do, whether it's physical, emotional, energetic, what have you, to me, that all helps kind of pave the road for us to be able to reconnect with our first sense, our intuitive sense. And there's different kinds of mediumship and different kinds of readers. I'm very visual, and and also auditory. So I hear names, words, what have you, and I'm very visual. So I'll see a scene or I'll see what a person looks like. Some people would call that like evidential mediumship. But how I practiced was really, well, at that first school, we practiced channeling. And even before that, I had seen energy and spirit, but I didn't know what it was at the time. But in the practice of channeling, it was highly uncomfortable because it's just sitting with the person and practicing, being in witness and observation of their wholeness and just what comes to you, you know, what's downloads. And the challenge is to not use our eyeballs and our nose and our ears to try to retract and guess and, you know, put this story together, but to really sense in this different way. And I'll never forget the first time I did it. I felt so stupid. I felt like this makes no sense whatsoever. But, the teacher was just like, say it, say it, say it. And I said something about his tongue. I mean, this is going back a long time, but I was sitting across from this man. It was like, this person is telling me something about your tongue or the tongue. And I explained what I was seeing, and his jaw dropped. He's like, oh my God, that is so and so. And they had tongue cancer or what have you. And just, confirmed it's his story. It's not our job to always interpret what the message is, because the message is for them. We just have to be brave enough to share exactly what we're seeing or sensing or hearing. And that kind of thing, it still happens today. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was with a client, and it was so funny because she was, we're trying to solve a problem, and we were accessing her father. And I was like, he's telling me like this, what do you call it? A duster, like on a stick, and he wants you to go get a duster and to actually clean out the inside of this, vehicle with it. And she's like, oh my God, he left a duster in the RV, And so she knew exactly what it was. But if I held back that information, we would have missed the whole communication about what was going on. So I think it takes a lot of practice, but it takes, even if we're not practicing with another person, we have to practice really building a relationship with our higher self and with this, this other field that we cannot see. And when we build that through meditation, through prayer, through talking, through dance, through sound, through music, whatever, how, there's a million ways to build a relationship, then we feel more confident and we can just start bringing that forward. But, I say that and say, also want to warn people, there's a lot of people that are not in integrity that do this work. And if you're interested in getting readings and so forth, I just urge you to do your homework or get a referral or something, because and even I'm, susceptible to this. You're feeling down, you're feeling desperate, you need to make a decision, you're feeling heartbroken. It's like, somebody just help me right now. And you'll call a local whoever, and just be careful, because it is, to me, it is divine communication. And just like everything, there's people who have abused that.
I think that it also is, whenever something like that happens to me, I chalk it up to another spiritual lesson. Like, okay, this is a lesson for me to trust my discernment or to practice more discernment. Like
Yes.
Every time that I've come up, when I first came into spiritual awareness, I was like, everybody is a saint. Everybody is an angel on earth. I thought like everybody wanted to help me. And I kept getting calls from scammers. They're like, give me your credit card number. I'm like, God wants to give me money. How wonderful. Like, this is beautiful. And I kept like going into all these traps, but it was just an opportunity. I see it now as just to practice discernment, not to trust everyone and everything, but just, to be aware of what's happening in the human experience. I really love this conversation. I love all of just all of your story and all of these really practical tools that you have. I think that that's one of the most important things. I hear so many spiritual teachers and they're just like, just let go, just let it go, girl. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? You have already listed off so many practical applications to how we can achieve some sort of healing in our lives. So I appreciate that so much. And I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
Well, no, I really appreciate the time. And I agree. I think the more practical we can be about this. In fact, I always tell people who are seeking or on a spiritual path of some sort, the number one thing you can do for yourself is stay grounded and stay stable. And that includes your blood sugar. That includes your sleep. That includes every aspect of you, because we cannot learn to trust ourselves until we know um, how to sustain a certain level of energy, frequency, vibration, truth, commitment, etc., for ourselves. And so this is like, it's like fine tuning a machine. And whatever you're dealing with, that's where we start. We get up, we have water, we get into our bodies, we pace ourselves, we take care of ourselves, we nurture ourselves. And when we are doing that, we are immediately more open than we were just trying to sit down and achieve something, grand. So I really appreciate you saying that. And in fact, my first book, I have a whole chapter about why letting go is one of my, well, I think it's one of the biggest myths and one of the most anxiety producing phrases for humankind. So I appreciate you saying that.
That's a beautiful synchronicity too. Well, Leah, thank you so much. All of your information will be in the liner notes of this episode so people can connect with you. And thank you. Thank you. We'll see
Thank
you next
you.
time.
Thank you very much.